in the country. And the civil rights movement spread across into Chattanooga, into Knoxville. There were also great civil rights and sit-in leaders over in those particular states. But Tennessee has not gotten its due in terms of being a leader in the civil rights movement, because most of the movement here did not result in massive violence like it did in Alabama, Little Rock, Arkansas, and so on. Much of the changes in Tennessee were painful, but they were usually nonviolent.
Very good. And you know, Dr. Lovett, I think we're getting ready for our next commercial break. And what we'd like to do for you to do during this last segment that's coming up is to think about the information that you believe that we ought to know out of this book. That is, what are some of the things that you found in terms of your study that almost anything that you have, many of us don't know anything about it, you see, but there are some outstanding kinds of things that I'm sure that you would like to talk about, and that's what we want you to do during the final segment. That is to identify for us those things that are in this book that you say that, well, I bet you didn't know that kind of information, and certainly we would appreciate that. I think we've got about half a minute before we come to an end of this segment, and we don't want to raise any other questions before we do that. But I think that you're giving us essentially what we wanted to have, because as you've indicated earlier, we've talked about the African-American experience during the Civil War and et cetera, but we've missed out on this. That Thurgood, I mean the Houston information and et cetera. We need that. We need to know that. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to this final segment of the show for today. The topic is the civil rights movement in Tennessee, and we're talking to the author of the book, Dr. Bobby Lovett from Tennessee State University. And of course, Dr. Lovett, during this last segment that we have, let's have you to talk to our audience about some of the things that you believe to be special in reference to your book here, and at the same time, at the end of which we would like for you to talk about some of the signings, the book signings that you've had and some that you're going to have, and how this book has been received by the various publics, because I'm familiar with some of the activity that has gone on around it, and I know there's been quite a bit of stir in reference to the information in reference to it. So let's talk about that.
Well, some of the unique things I think you'll find about the civil rights movement in Tennessee is that many of the leaders were female leaders, like Maxine Smith of Memphis. And in the general movement, it's really a male-dominated movement, but some of the most important leaders in the South and in Tennessee were females who have not gotten their due in the books that have been generated so far. And the book will talk about a lot of grassroots leaders in the civil rights movement, white and black leaders who made a big difference in bringing about these momentous changes in our state and also in our region and also in the country. The book has a chronology for the civil rights movement in Tennessee and the nation in general in the back of the book for the use of teachers, so the teachers can get a lot of this information out to their particular students. And the chapters are organized in such a way that they are really kind of like a story that flows. Because what I found is that teachers did not know very much about the civil rights movement in Tennessee because there was no such book. And they had no information really to impart this information to their students. And so as students come to college and universities, they know hardly anything about this particular movement. We forget that the average high school student was just born since 1985. And the average college student was born, you know, about the same time, 1980, and they don't know very much about these particular events. So I think those are the strong, you know, points of the book. The University of Tennessee Press, which published the book, I may say has done an excellent job in editing the book and coming up with some ideas to make the book more useful for the general public, although it is a history book. It has been well received. The book is selling quite well according to the publisher. It's only in hardback right now, and The book is about 483 pages. It, according to the publisher 2 days ago, has been nominated for a National Book Award.
Good, very good.
That's a nomination, so hopefully,
well, that's
perhaps,
good.
you know, the book may win that award. But it also, the book has been introduced at Tennessee State University with a book signing in November when it first came out. There will be a book signing at Davis Kidd Bookstore on Monday, 6 p.m., February 13th, during Black History Month. And then 3 days later, there will be a book signing at the Hermitage on February 16th at 5 o'clock. The Hermitage is having its second annual Black History program, which was well received last year. And so they have asked me to come sign some books if people will come, and also to speak for them at that program on the 16th. And there are other places that will be signing books, of course, to get it across the state, in Memphis, in Chattanooga, in Knoxville, because the book is about, you know, the broad movement across the state of Tennessee.
You know, Dr. Lovett, I think you mentioned the fact that many of our young people are coming to our institutions of higher education without any real knowledge in terms of the most recent American history dealing with the movement. What would you suggest as the method whereby we might be able to reach more of our young people, not necessarily, not only with information relative to civil rights, but that we might be able to create a new consciousness among them? What can we do? Or what should we do?
Well, we started with the premise that, you know, we've got to get to students when they're young in middle school and high school, and that's why we include this chart in the back. To get to teachers, you have to educate the teachers about this kind of history, but especially about Tennessee history, period. And many of our students have lived in Tennessee all their lives, and they know very little about Tennessee history, unless they come to, say, Tennessee State, where they take a Tennessee history course, but only if they are teacher ed majors, you know, they take that course. And so surveys across the nation show that the level of historical literacy about American history and then state history, period, is not what any of us would like it to be. And so I think we've got to do a better job in the secondary schools.
You know, Dr. Lovett, one thing in reference to the civil rights movement, and I want you to think in terms of speaking to our young people in reference to this, one thing has to do with the vote, you see. And how did you see the vote in terms of what you did here in this movement?
Well, in this book, you're going to find 3 chapters called Politics and Civil Rights. And of course, it starts with the 1965 Voter Rights Act and how that act came about and what part Tennesseans played in it, and also how it unfolded across Tennessee and how it empowered especially African Americans in Tennessee. And it's such a massive story just for that short time, 1965 to 2005, that it took 3 chapters in the book to cover it. So you'll find plenty of information on that.
And of course, you would also encourage people to become active in terms of what the movement was all about, to register and become involved in the political process and et cetera. Would that be?
Yes, hopefully a book like this would be a motivator for this present generation, as well as the surviving older generations, to continue that particular movement, because it's not over, as I say in the last part of the book, that there's a long, long ways for the United States society to go before our society is truly an egalitarian society, and it lives up to the creed of the Constitution of the United States. And if people are not aware of their rights, then they have no rights. And therefore, hopefully, if they read books like this, they'll be conscious of what they need to do today, because many of their rights are being corroded before their very eyes. And because they are not actively involved as citizens and as voters as they should be, the Constitution is being trampled on today, and has been for the last 30 years.
You know, I'm reminded over the last couple of minutes that we have here, Dr. Lovett, of some of the things that you said in terms of the Declaration of Independence at the 21st century, that it might not have been especially meant for African Americans at the time, but nevertheless they were gerrymandered into it, and it became a part of what we do And I would imagine you would feel the same way in reference to the civil rights movement and some of the things that have occurred there, that these are our activities and that the younger generation have to carry on those activities.
Right.
Is that?
Well, the African American civil rights movement benefited the whole nation because it has tried to force the nation to be inclusive rather than exclusive. Of course, the original Constitution was a document written for Anglo-Saxons, and gradually that Constitution has been changed to include other people, starting with the 13th Amendment, which really radically revised the Constitution of the United States, as I said before on this show. And then with the new amendments, like the 24th Amendment in the 1970s, that brought 18-year-olds into the suffrage and brought 18-year-olds in so that they had the right to vote. We have gradually changed the Constitution of the United States to be more inclusive. And then we have passed acts like the 1990 Civil Rights Act, which gave women quite a bit of rights that they had not had before and brought them more into the Constitution of the United States. It's a living, breathing document that becomes more perfect, and more as we fight, we get rid of the imperfections in the Constitution of the United States. And that's what the Civil Rights Movement has done, has tried to get the imperfections out of the Constitution of 1789.
And so, Dr. Lovett, you would probably say that in spite of everything, that America has become better in terms of it being inclusive and bringing more people into the process.
Absolutely, and that's important because America ought to be a beacon of light upon a hill, shining for all the rest of the world to see. If we're going to take democracy across the world as a product, as we're trying in Iraq, then we have to pay attention to the civil rights movement as it continues.
Very good. And of course, Dr. Lovett, let me, over the last 20 seconds, thank you for coming by and giving us that excellent information in reference to the civil rights movement in the state of Tennessee. And also, let me encourage our audience not only to tune in again next week for another informative edition, but also to pay attention to these sign-ins and go by and meet Dr. Lovett in terms of this book. And let me encourage you to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.